What's a good opening for KyuruKyurun? Oh, I know. I'll do that thing. So October 7th will be the release of Curiosity Diva, which is the debut for KyuruKyurun team. This will be the first time that level 0 lyric cards are going to be in a booster set instead of the standard starter deck. Curiosity Diva also introduces a new keyword ability, which is Awake. Awakened state SIGNIs unlock extra skills when they are awakened, which can be achieved by fulfilling specific requirements. So first we move on to the Center lyrics. First is the new team, which is KyuruKyurun Center, which is Miko Miko 3. Her enter skill is draw 2 cards unless your opponent discards 1. Her auto skill is whenever this lyric attacks, your opponent has 3 or less cards in their hand, draw 1. If they have 4 or more cards in their hand, your opponent discards 1. Her once per game skill is look at your opponent's hand and choose a card and remove that card from the game. Miko Miko Center focuses on draws and discards, which is the typical blue archetype. However, her once per game skill completely removes a card from the entire game, which can be guard or servant cards, which your opponent cannot be included back to their deck once they refresh it. Next we have Umer 3, Key to Uproar, which is from Ancient Surprise team. Her enter skill is look at your opponent's hand and choose a card and put that card to the bottom of its owner's deck. Her auto skill is at the beginning of your attack phase, you may swap the positions of 2 target SIGNI on your field. Her once per game skill is put 1 Hastalic on your opponent's SIGNI zones. This new center for Umer is basically better than the previous version, since the old one only has swapping positions of your SIGNIs, and compared to the old one that freezes your opponent's SIGNI zone, this one puts a Hastalic instead. So what is a Hastalic? A Hastalic is basically a token that you put on your opponent's SIGNI zone, which your opponent must pay 1 or discard 1, or the SIGNI in that SIGNI zone needs to be vanished. Next we have the new center for the Ancient Surprise team member, which is Tawil 3 Heralding 1. Her auto skill is at the beginning of your attack phase, if there are 3 or more red SIGNI on your field, you charge 1. And her once per game skill is look at the top 6 cards of your deck and separate them into 3 card face up and face down piles. Your opponent puts 1 pile in your trash and the other pile is added to your hand. Compared to the old one, this center version has a 50-50 chance of getting a certain pile, depending on how you put your piles. Next we have the new center for Hirana, a step towards the glimmer. She has a constant skill, which is during your turn, SIGNI in your center SIGNI zone gets plus 3k power. Her enter skill is draw 1 and charge 1. And her once per game skill is draw 2 and charge 2. But at the end of this turn, put all cards in your hand and zone into the trash. This Hirana is more aggressive than the previous Hirana, where the previous one is more stable and can attack twice by downing your assist lyrics. So in my opinion, the older one is probably more stable. Next we have the new center for Musica Vogue 3EX. Her once per turn auto skill is during your turn, when another lyric on your field grows, target SIGNI on your opponent's field get minus 5k until end of turn. Her second auto skill is once per turn, during your opponent's turn, when another lyric on your field grows, add target black SIGNI from your trash to your hand. And her once per game skill is return target assist lyric on your field without attack phase and whose grow cost isn't 0 to your lyric deck. Musica centers are basically focused on your assist lyrics growth, which is similar to the previous version of her center. However, there are only a finite number of times your opponent and your assist lyrics can grow, so there is only a few times that you can use her skills. Next is from Uchu no Hajimari team, the new center for Nova Destiny Imperial. Her enter skill is look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put one on top of your deck and the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order. Her auto skill is whenever this lyric attacks, you may put a card underneath this lyric into its owner's lyric trash. If you do, put target card from your trash on top of your deck. Her once per game skill is put target white SIGNI on your trash on top of your deck. At the end of this turn, draw 2. Similar to the previous version of the Nova Center, Nova focuses on stacking cards on top of your deck, which can either be drawn or used to fulfill certain effects for SIGNIs, such as revealing level 1s or trashing certain levels. In my opinion, this new Nova Center is more stable as she has more opportunities to stack cards on top of your deck, be it there are cards under this lyric if you want to use it. Next, we have the new center for VJ Wolf 3rd verse out from Card Jockey team. Her enter skill is enter charge 1 for each level of your assist lyrics on your field. She has an act ability which is once per turn, pay 3, 2 green, vanish target SIGNI on your opponent's field with power 10k or more. Her once per game skill is cards in your enter zone gets multi-enter for this turn. This VJ Wolf is more versatile in my opinion compared to the previous version, where you only enter charge 1, and her act skill is downing herself and losing a lyric attack to enter charge, being able to enter charge more than 1 depending on the assist lyric level, and being able to vanish an opponent's SIGNI, albeit once per turn, is actually more useful. And her multi-enter is useful for an aggressive 1 turn for a multicolored deck. Next, we move on to the piece cards. The first piece, which is the KyuruKyurun team limited piece, which is Eternal Immortal KyuruKyurun. This piece can be used to cut in just after your opponent uses a piece with a team limited use condition. So the effects are, choose one of the following. First is counter the effects of the target piece in your opponent's check zone, and the piece counted this way is removed from the game. And the second choice is draw 1 and enter charge 1. This is a very versatile piece as you can negate a piece entirely, albeit only a team conditioned piece. And if your opponent does not use it, you can use this piece for its second effect, which can be resourceful. The second piece is Machina Guardian Dragon. The effects are, choose one of the following. First is perform the following. Put a card in your enter zone into your trash or discard 1, a total of 3 times. If you do whenever a lyric on your opponent's field attacks on this turn, negate that attack instead. The second choice is draw 1. This piece focuses on black archetype since it fills your trash, thus can be used as a resource. So the next piece is Red Zone, a red piece with the use condition of having 2 or more red lyrics on your field. The effects are, target red SIGNI on your field gains Assassin until end of turn. Discard up to 3 cards and draw cards equal to the number of cards you discarded plus 2. This card is basically a Deus Ex Machina support as it's a red piece, but also fills your trash for black archetypes to use as resource, and similar to X's skill, which is discard and draw. Next is a green piece, Dance in the Lands, with use condition of having 2 or more green lyrics on your field. The effects is choose one of the following. The first is Energy Charge 4. Then add up to 2 target cards from your Energy Zone to your hand. The second choice is up to 2 target green Signi on your field gains Lancer until end of turn. This is a rather resourceful use of your Energy Zone, since you can add back cards that you have Energy Charge back to your hand, or you can use it aggressively to gain Lancer for SIGNIs with high power for multiple damage to your opponent. Next is a colorless piece, which is Paradise Universe. The effects of this piece can be used for the entire duration of the game, which is the constant. If one of your abilities or effects refer to a level 3 or less Cosmos Signi in your deck and trash, you may treat it as a level 1 instead. This may seem ambiguous, but Cosmos Signis usually refers to level 1 target Signis, which when using this piece, you can turn Cosmos Signis other than level 1s to level 1, so the effects of certain Signis can be activated. Next is another colorless piece, which is Don't Stop. Similar as before, the effects of this piece continues for the duration of the game, which is your opponent cannot guard unless they pay additional 1 or discards 1. This is a rather annoying piece, since guard is vital in staying alive, and needing to discard 1 or pay 1 slowly chips away your opponent's resources. Another new feature introduced in Curiosity Diva are connected spells, which are spells that have connected illustrations to specific SR Signis. So first we have the white SR Signi Gay Bulk Full Armed, which is connected to the spell Get Bulk. First we look at the skills for the Signi. First is a constant skill, which is your Sentinel Lyric gains once per turn auto skill. When this lyric attacks, put target Signi on your opponent's field into its owner's trash. And her second skill is auto. At the beginning of your attack phase, you may down a white Signi on your field. If you do, draw 1. For the connected spell is perform the following, which are 2 effects. The first is look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Reveal a white Signi from among them and add it to your hand. Put the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order. The second is your Sentinel Lyric gains auto. When this lyric attacks, if there is a Gay Bulk Full Arm on your field, put target Signi on your opponent's field into its owner's trash until end of turn. The spell also has Life Burst, which is return target up Signi on your opponent's field into its owner's hand. Gay Bulk focuses on trashing your opponent's Signis, which when using her connected spell while she is on the field further enhances it, so you can trash up to 2 Signis in a single turn. Next we have a black SR Signi, which is Eclipse Natural Planet Queen with the connected spell Moon Bites. So for the SR Signi first, her enter skill is put the top 3 cards of your deck into your trash. Then if all cards put into the trash this way are level 1 Signi, you may pay 1. If you do, target Signi on your opponent's field gets minus 10k power until end of turn. Her second skill is auto. When this card is put into your trash from your deck, you may pay 1. If you do, add target level 1 Signi without a guard from your trash to your hand. And so for the connected spell, the effects are add target Cosmos Signi from your trash to your hand. Then if that Signi is an Eclipse Natural Planet Queen, target Signi on your opponent's field get minus 2k power until end of turn. The spell also has a constant effect, which is as long as this card is in your deck or trash. If one of your effects refers to this card, you may treat it as a level 1 Signi instead. The life burst for the spell is vanish target level 2 or less Signi on your opponent's field. Eclipse basically focuses on minusing your opponent's power. As supported by its connected spell, you can also return her back to your hand and use her infinitely. And when using the Eclipse auto skill, you can get her connected spell back from the trash, as her auto skill returns a level 1 black Signi from your trash to your hand, which is connected to the constant skill of the spell. Next we have the red SR Signi, which is Yaha Code Excel with its connected spell Apocalypse Drift. So first, the SR Signi, her skill is constant. As long as there is a card underneath this Signi, it gets plus 5k power and gains an auto skill, which is whenever this Signi attacks, you may pay 2 red. If you do, vanish target on your opponent's field with 8k power or less. Her enter skill is you may put target level 3 Signi on your field underneath this Signi. So for the connected spell, the effects are: put this card under target red Signi on your field if there are no cards underneath it. The spell has 2 constant skill. The first is red Signi on top of this card gains an auto skill, which is at the beginning of your attack phase, you enter charge 1. And its second constant skill is Yaha Code Excel on top of this card gets plus 2k power. The life burst for this spell is vanish target up Signi on your opponent's field. Yaha basically supports Deus Ex Machina mechanic, which is the soul, as her constant skill refers if there is a card underneath it, which also can be supported by her enter skill. And by using the Apocalypse Drift spell, you can technically acquire an additional soul, as this spell gives effect to the Signi on top of it. Next we have the blue SRO Signi, which is Hamelin, Master Trickster, which has a connected spell which is Hamelin Step. So the skills for Hamelin is first, auto. Whenever this Signi attacks, your opponent may discard 2. If they do, negate this attack. And her second auto skill is at the beginning of your attack phase, you may pay 2 blue. If you do, turn target Signi in the front of this Signi face down. At the end of this turn, if a Signi is not in the same position as the Signi turned face down in this way, turn that Signi face up. However, if there is a Signi in the same position, put the target Signi face down into the trash. For the connected spell, the effects are: draw 2 cards and put 1 Hamelin Master Trickster from your hand onto your field. Then target Hamelin Master Trickster gains a constant skill, which is this Signi attack is not negated by this Signi's effect until end of turn. The life burst for the spell is you may discard 1. If you do, put target up Signi on your opponent's field to the bottom of their deck. Hamelin may look as difficult to use since she has an auto skill that negates her attack by herself. However, since your opponent need to discard 2, and when using the Hamelin step, your opponent must discard 2 and her attack does still go through. So she may be tricky since to fully utilize her, you may need to use the spell first. But it supports hand destruction even without the spell. Next we have the green SR Signi, Gaia Jade Angel Queen, with her connected spell Edenify. Gaia has 3 auto skills. The first is at the beginning of your attack phase, if there are 3 or more angel Signis on your field, you enter charge 1. Her second auto skill is at the end of your turn, add 1 target angel Signi from your ender zone to your hand. Her third skill is at the beginning of your turn, you may pay 2. If you do, put target angel Signi from your trash onto your field. However, the enter abilities of the Signi do not activate. Next is the connected spell, which effects is choose one of the following. The first is put an Angel Signi from your Inner Zone into your trash and discard an Angel Signi. If you do, vanish target Signi on your opponent's field with power 8k or more. The second effect is add target Gaia, Jade Angel Queen from your Inner Zone to your hand. The spell's life burst is vanish target level 2 or more Signi on your opponent's field. Clearly, Gaia focuses on an angel deck, as she basically adds cards from your Inner Zone back to your hand, thus supported by her connected spell. She is also a self-sustaining Signi, as her spell also allows to get her back from the Inner Zone if you charge her or check her as a life cloth. Curiosity Diva also introduces sister Signis, which are Signi that supports previous SR Signis. So the first is Buffa Phantom Beast, which is the sister for Buffalo Phantom Terra Beast from Changing Diva. So Buffa has two skills. The first is a constant skill. As long as there is a Buffalo Phantom Terra Beast god on your field, this Signi gets plus 7k power. Her second skill is Enter. This Signi gets plus 1k power for every level of each of lyrics on your field until end of turn. Buffa basically supports her sister, which is gaining power to reach 20k power for Buffalo's skill to activate. And if you do the math, Buffa has a base power of 3k power. And with her sister is on the field, she gets another 7k power, which is a total of 10k power. And her Enter skill allows her to gain power for every level of your lyrics, which can be a total of 7, which is another 7k power. So that makes a total of 17k power. However, when you look at Buffalo's first auto skill, she adds 4k power for a Terra Beast that enters the field after this Signi. So with the plus 4, she gets a total of 21k power, thus activating Buffalo's second auto skill, which is vanishing Signis with 12k power or less. The next sister Signi is CZ Natural Element, which is the sister Signi for 02 Natural Element Queen from Changing Diva. So her skill is whenever this Signi attacks, your opponent draws 1 and discards 1 at random. Her second skill is Enter, pay 1 blue. If there is a 02 Natural Element Queen on your field, target Signi on your opponent's field gets minus 4k power until end of turn. CZ further supports 02's skill, which is if your opponent discards 2 or more cards in a turn, a Signi gains minus 8k power instead. When you use 02 and CZ on the same turn, your opponent draws a total of 2 cards and discards 2 cards at total, which activates 02's first skill. And with CZ's Enter skill, you can get a total of minus 12k power on a Signi on a single turn. The next sister Signi is Little John, Jade General, which is the sister Signi for Robin Hood, Jade General Queen from Interlude Diva. So her first skill is constant. As long as there is a Robin Hood Jade General Queen on your field or Inner Zone, this Signi gets plus 5k power. Her second skill is constant. Robin Hood Jade General Queen on your field gains a constant skill, which is if this Signi attacks, instead of turn up to 2 Signi on your field face down and attack. At the end of this turn, if a Signi is not in the same position as a Signi turn face down this way, turn that Signi face up. Little John further supports Robin Hood's skill, as she requires to have no Signis other than herself for her first skill to activate. Thus, Robin Hood's auto skill, which is turning other Signis on your field face down. However, with Little John, instead of disabling those Signis by turning them face down, you can turn those Signis up after Robin Hood's attack thus allowing for those SIGNIs to attack as well. Next sister SIGNI is Valkyrie, Doomed Angel, which is the sister SIGNI for Valkyrie, Doomed Angel Queen from Changing Diva. Her first skill is auto once per turn. When a Valkyrie Doomed Angel Queen on your field attacks, discard any number of Angel SIGNIs. Target SIGNI on your opponent's field gets minus 4k power for each card discarded this way until end of turn. Her X skill is pay 1 black and down this SIGNI to put target black Angel SIGNI from your trash to your hand. Valkyrie and Valkyrie basically recycles themselves when they are trashed, as Valkyrie allows to return target Angel SIGNI from your trash to your hand, which also supports Valkyrie's effect of discarding Angel SIGNIs for minusing your opponent's powers. And Valkyrie also allows to return target black Angel SIGNI from your trash to your hand, which can also be Valkyrie herself, thus repeating a loop of trash and recycling. So the rest of the SR SIGNIs. First we have the white SR, which is Tamamozen Phantom Spirit Queen. She has a rise that requires you to place on top of a SIGNI to be put on the field. Her constant skill is during your opponent's turn, this SIGNI gains Shadow. And her second skill is auto at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase. Target SIGNI on your opponent's field gains constant. This SIGNI cannot attack unless you pay 1 until end of turn. She has Life Burst, which is choose 1. Either return target up SIGNI on your opponent's field back to their hand or draw 1. Tamamozen is basically a disruptor for your opponents since she has a shadow, so she cannot be targeted by any effects or SIGNIs, and while she's on the field, your opponent needs to pay 1 for a target SIGNI to attack, thus slowly chipping away their resources. Next is the red SR SIGNI, which is Diabrite Natural Engagement Crystal. Her enter skill is discard 1 and look at the top 2 cards of your deck. Add 1 from among them to your hand and put the rest back into your trash. Her auto skill is once per turn. When a red SIGNI on your field becomes the target of your opponent's abilities or effect, your opponent chooses a card from their inner zone and puts it into their trash. Her life burst is choose 1. Either vanish target up SIGNI on your opponent's field or draw 1. Diabrite is basically a simple SIGNI which you can burn your opponent's inner zone or recycle cards in your hand, which also supports black archetype. The second red SR is Draco Natural Planet Queen. Why does she look so familiar for some reason? Anyway, moving on. Her auto skill is at the beginning of your attack phase, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck and put them to the bottom of your deck in any random order. Then you may pay 6. Decrease this enter cost by 1 for every level 1 SIGNI revealed this way. If you do, vanish target SIGNI on your opponent's field with 12k power or less. 6 enter may seem large, and betting of getting a level 1 SIGNI from among them may be difficult. However, if you refer to the previous piece card that allows Cosmos SIGNIs to be level 1, just by building a full Cosmos deck can reduce this cost to basically 0, as each level of Cosmos SIGNIs revealed becomes an automatically level 1 SIGNI. Next we have the blue SR, which is Honey Toe Ice Code Order, which is a KyuruKyurun team limited SIGNI. She has 2 auto skill. The first is a team limited auto skill. At the beginning of your opponent's turn, if your opponent has 2 or more cards in their hand, they can only draw 1 in total during the draw phase instead of 2. The second auto skill is at the beginning of your attack phase, each player draw 1. Then you look at your opponent's hand and choose a card without guard and put it onto the bottom of their deck. Hanito further supports the Miko Miko Center, as she allows your opponent to draw and then discard them, thus limiting their hand for further Miko Miko skill for hand destruction. The next blue SR is H2O Natural Element Queen, which has the rise requirement of placing it on top of an atom SIGNI on your field. She has a constant skill, which is during your opponent's turn. If this SIGNI has one or more cards underneath it and would leave the field by your opponent's effects, instead you may put all cards underneath her into your trash. Her second skill is auto. Whenever this SIGNI attacks, draw 1 and your opponent discards 1. Her life burst is draw 2 and put 1 atom SIGNI from your hand on your field. H2O is basically a powerful SIGNI with hand destruction, as she allows herself to remain on the field by discarding cards under her, which can be further supported by cards that put themselves under SIGNIs. Next we have the green SR SIGNI, which is Tiger Roaring Cannon, which has the Awaken feature. So first is her auto skill. When this SIGNI vanishes a SIGNI on your opponent's field through battle, it reaches an awakened state. And her constant skill is, as long as this SIGNI is awakened, it gets plus 1k power and Lancer and Shadow for SIGNI with 10k power or less. Tiger is basically a tank, which can be a powerful SIGNI during your next turn. Next is the black SR SIGNI, Modem, Code Heart. She has 2 auto skill. The first is, at the beginning of your attack phase, remove up to 2 spells in your trash from the game. Then target SIGNI on your opponent's field get minus 3k power for each spell removed this way until end of turn, which is a total of 6k power. Her second auto skill is, once per turn, when you use a spell, put the top 2 cards of your deck or your opponent's deck into the trash. Modem focuses on spell plays, as her second auto skill further supports her first auto skill, which you can use to generate resources by trashing your own deck, or you can do deck destruction for your opponent. Something to note on, for those who did not buy the starter decks for other teams, can buy this set, thus gaining level 0s for the KyuruKyurun team. However, there is only Miko Center for this set, and you can only get a Sizzlerix of Maho and Yuka. So if you want to play KyuruKyurun team, you can practically focus just on this set and upcoming sets for the Maho and Yuka Center. And that is all for the Curiosity Diva set introduction. So until then, see you next time!